Get access to exclusive videos and more, and support the channel on patreon.com/manlightfoot. Got an indie update for y'all. The 3 Tomes by Brie Animator, which I'm editing and sound designing for again, is getting ready to drop a Kickstarter to fund episode 2. Tammy, Shirley, and Sia get more than they bargained for as they learn more about the 3 Tomes and the vampires that seek them. This episode is going to give you more spells to cast, more vampires to face/kiss, more romantic inks.
Boo this man!
More fourth thing. You know how y'all can't get enough of that fourth thing. The Kickstarter starts on Juneteenth. That's the 19th of June for you non-woke folks. Go over and show your support on the 3 Tomes Episode 2 Kickstarter page to be ready when it drops. And also go support the 3 Tomes pilot over on Brie Animator's YouTube channel. Now on to the video.
No turning back.
I want to bring in another writer, a human.
That's blasphemy! That's nonsense!
Yep, that's me.
Did you ever think the Tales from the Crypt Keeper needed to have a whole origin movie about him? That's what I Am Frankelda, or Soy Frankelda for my Mexican fans, basically feels like. A prequel to a stop-motion anthology series by Cartoon Network, from Mexico, created by the Embreeze brothers. Hosted by Frankelda and her book of spooks named Hernival, it's a show where they tell stories of kids facing monkey paw-like consequences for their bad behavior or inactions.
You said a mouthful.
I know hearing that it's a prequel to a series might scare you away aside from the haunting imagery, but it just tells the story of how the main character started out and how the show came to be so anyone can get into it. Which, with animation that looks like this, ain't no freaking way this should only be seen by just fans. Fair warning, I haven't really watched the series until this movie, but from a newcomer's perspective and it being a prequel, it works. It's kinda like the Powerpuff Girls movie, an origin movie different from the series that you could just watch as its own thing, just with way more nightmare fuel. So what's the story? It follows a girl named Francisca Imelda who dreams of being an author, but in the 19th century, women being authors is shunned. As a little girl, she came up with the stories with her mother who gets the Disney treatment when Francisca was just a kid, leaving her to her grandmother that doesn't care to hear her stories since she believes women's place is cooking and cleaning.
What a bitch.
And also because the stories freak people out. One day her stories come to life when her prince character named Hernival, who takes being told he's fictional pretty well, pops out from the ground. He shows her the stories she came up with her mother weren't just stories as she's taken to the realm of fiction, taking on her new pen name and ghost persona Frankelda, a combination of her first and last name with a K in the middle. She's now tasked with saving the royal family of this realm by writing a new story, but conflict arises when the royal nightmare maker Procustus hates that he's being replaced. So he plans a coup against the royal family in hopes of stealing Frankelda's stories and ruling over the whole realm. It definitely seems very dense for a simple prequel movie, especially since the series is an anthology, so that adds to the denseness, but it makes sense once you get into it. You get Frankelda's struggles with wanting to be a writer in a world that won't let her. The Frankelda persona she creates for herself shows off how she's so done with the world. With the way everyone's mistreating her after her mother died, who wouldn't want to escape from that hell? Her escaping to this fantasy technically of her own making puts her at a conflict with herself more than she realizes. Even her want to have a romance with Hernival is tragic since he's just a creation of her imagination. Feels like a different level of ego there when you think about it. It plays into an interpretation I have, being that one of egos fighting with their imagination. Hell, she falls in love with a character that she created. It's one of the ultimate forms of power fantasy. Of course, the way the movie goes is supposed to lead into the show. If you've been a fan of the show, it's a satisfying prequel that gives a great origin to these two. It also adds to the tragedy of the characters since it fully explains why Frankelda and Hernival are telling spooky stories in a random nigga's house. Even though the secondary characters are basically just fictional, they still have depth to them. Hernival is a prince with the weight of the fictional world on his shoulders. He wants to save his parents, but at the same time, he needs Frankelda to do that. At the same time, he's also falling in love with Frankelda, so he's trying to avoid feeling like he's using her. Sadly, he gets caught up in the royal nightmare maker's plans, which causes him tensions with Frankelda. Their romance was something I was adverse to at first, but as it goes, they're pretty adorable. Once you start thinking they're cute, their story hits you a lot harder, as well as more tragically. It's like Romeo and Juliet if Juliet made Romeo in her mind. Procustus is a nasty, conniving advisor type of villain. He's an egotist that's clearly afraid of having to change with new times, even though these are all basically immortal beings who've witnessed different times. It just makes you realize even more how much of a jackass Procustus is, really. He plays the whole, I'm just here to take care of the king and queen act, but clearly just trying to take over, secretly. It's Jafar in a really, really gross spider form, basically. He's a great villain that makes sure you remember his horrible mug. He's not the redeemable type since his motivations are so greedy. The group that helps him rebel is ultimately fodder, but they're interesting in their designs, which we'll get to. They were characters from Frankelda's stories in the series, but now we're given more context as to who they actually are from the show. The story again leads up to the series that's on HBO Max, a whole different service by the way since it's on Netflix, but the theme and message of the movie can still stand on its own, while still being satisfying for fans of the show. Of course, if you're looking for a proper conclusion to what happened at the end of the show, you're going to be waiting even longer. Boo! The animation, the best way to describe it, God, does every frame demand you watch it. Like, this movie has to be perceived for just all the pure craftsmanship and detail on display. There's so much fine sculpting detail in the backgrounds and character design. Not one time do you want to stop looking at the screen, which speaks how stupid streaming is, because this shit desperately needed to be in theaters, man. It has a lot going on in the designs, but the cinematography is thankfully so on point that you don't get lost in any of it. You really can follow along just fine with everything and keep track of what's going on. Even when they start clashing into each other, it doesn't feel like just clay dolls colliding or nothing. You can actually tell what's happening. I want one of these shots framed on my wall. The crew did some excellent work crafting such a crazy but very intricate world. The Cinema Phantasma crew wanted to up the ante on the show, and they sure as hell ain't fold. I should also mention this is a musical just like the show is, which the songs are fine. Look, it's no Encanto, Coco, or Book of Life, but the songs get the job done to get across the story and the character's turmoil. You won't be singing these back to yourself much, but you'll remember the images that go with them. I Am Frankelda or Soy Frankelda is a masterwork in stop-motion animation. Frankelda's story is tragic yet triumphant as you see her try to make her art. Its soap opera-like story fits the grandness of the scenery. The characters are all outlandish but sincere in how they go about their art. It's an amazing upping of the ante from the show, with it even being more PG-13 instead of the TV PG. It doesn't rely too much on the lore of the show to get into it. You really can't just go into this and go right into the show if you want. While it still gives plenty of fan service for those that follow the show. If you're new, you'll be able to keep up with the story just fine. The animation is something that should be on the big screen someday because TV screens are just bullshit for this type of movie. Soy Frankelda or I Am Frankelda is basically your favorite artist's favorite movie. It's a hauntingly good time with a scary amount of effort put into it.